Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the Islamic Shahada channel. North Korea, a land of silence, secrecy, and absolute control. For decades, it has stood as one of the most isolated and tightly governed nations on Earth. Its borders are sealed, its information flow meticulously filtered, and its people conditioned to live within a system where the state defines not only truth, but faith itself. In this nation, religion does not officially exist. The ideology of Jusha, introduced by Kim Il-sung in the mid-20th century, replaced all spiritual traditions with a belief in human self-reliance and loyalty to the ruling family. It is a philosophy that elevates the leader to a near-divine status, a living symbol of unity and destiny. Within Juche, devotion to the Kim family functions as a form of civil religion. Portraits of the leaders hang in every home. Their names are spoken with reverence, and every national ritual becomes an act of collective worship. To the outside world, it is a paradox, a state that claims atheism yet enforces a faith-like obedience to power. Officially, the government declares North Korea an atheist state, where all religious activity must be conducted under state supervision, or not at all. Churches, temples, and mosques are virtually non-existent beyond a handful of state-controlled institutions built for diplomatic display. For ordinary citizens, owning a Bible, a Quran, or any religious text can lead to imprisonment, torture, or even death. This absolute rejection of organized religion makes North Korea unique, not merely for its political isolation, but for its attempt to construct an entirely secular nation, one in which the sacred has been absorbed by the state. The spiritual dimension of life has been replaced by a rigid system of ideological faith. There is no God, only the leader. Unlike in many parts of Asia, Islam has never had historical roots in the northern half of the Korean peninsula. Before the division of Korea in 1945, Islamic presence in the region was virtually non-existent. No Muslim communities, no trade routes, and no mosques had ever taken root. The peninsula's pre-modern connections with the Islamic world were limited to distant maritime exchanges through China, never extending into what is now North Korea. For most of its modern history, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or DPRK, has stood outside the global religious map. Its focus was inward, shaped by self-reliance, ideological conformity, and the legacy of Japanese colonization. In this context, the emergence of Islam within North Korea's borders was not born of missionary work or migration, but of political diplomacy. It was not until the late 1970s and early 1980s that a subtle bridge began to form. During this period, North Korea sought to expand its international relations beyond the Soviet bloc, establishing ties with countries in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. These relationships were driven not by theology, but by strategic necessity, a way to secure allies, access trade, and resist Western isolation. Among the most significant of these partnerships were those forged with Iran, Libya, and Pakistan, nations that shared both anti-imperialist rhetoric and political pragmatism with Pyongyang. Iran, following its 1979 Islamic Revolution, became a particularly close partner. Both Tehran and Pyongyang viewed themselves as revolutionary states, opposing U.S. dominance and Western influence. This ideological alignment led to cooperation in the fields of military technology, education, and diplomatic exchange. It was through this narrow diplomatic channel that Islam quietly entered the territory of North Korea, not as a movement of faith, but as an unintended consequence of international politics. Muslim diplomats, engineers, and students began arriving in Pyongyang, representing their nations in embassies and cooperative programs. Among them were Iranians, Pakistanis, Syrians, and Libyans, small in number but significant in symbolic presence. For the first time in its history, the call to prayer was heard, faintly, privately, within the walls of foreign embassies. The Quran was recited in the heart of one of the world's most controlled societies, though only by a few who were permitted to stay. Throughout the 1980s, Pyongyang became home to a small but steady stream of Muslim diplomats, yet their religious life remained confined to the secure compounds of their embassies. There were no public displays of faith, no conversion efforts, and no interaction with the local population on religious matters. The state strictly prohibited any form of proselytization or religious outreach. Hidden behind high diplomatic walls in Pyongyang stands one of the rarest religious sites in the world, a mosque that almost no one in North Korea can ever enter. It is known as the Ar-Rahman Mosque, named after one of the attributes of God in Islam, meaning the most merciful. Located within the heavily guarded compound of the Iranian embassy, the Ar-Rahman Mosque is believed to have been built in the early to mid-1990s, a period when relations between Iran and North Korea were strengthening both politically and economically. The mosque's creation was not the result of a state policy or an act of religious tolerance, but rather an accommodation for Iranian diplomats and staff who required a place for daily prayers. The structure itself is modest, yet unmistakably Islamic. It features a small dome, an Arabic inscription above its entrance, and a prayer area capable of hosting only a few dozen worshippers. Its presence is remarkable, not because of its size or architectural beauty, but because of where it stands, in the heart of one of the most atheistic nations on earth. Access to the mosque is strictly limited. Only Iranian diplomats and, on occasion, a few Muslim visitors from other embassies such as those of Pakistan, Syria, or Libya are allowed to pray inside. No ordinary North Korean citizen is permitted to enter. The site is considered foreign territory under international law, protected by diplomatic immunity, effectively making it a piece of Islamic land within a godless state. The North Korean government neither promotes nor publicly acknowledges the mosque. For the regime, its existence is a necessary diplomatic compromise rather than an act of religious recognition. The leadership tolerates it because it serves the practical purpose of maintaining cordial relations with Muslim-majority nations like Iran and Pakistan, countries that have historically provided Pyongyang with economic and technological cooperation, particularly in times of international isolation. Photographs of the Ar-Rahman Mosque are extremely rare. Most known images have circulated through the archives of foreign journalists, embassy visitors, or global media agencies documenting religious architecture in unlikely places. From those limited visuals, the mosque appears quiet, nearly deserted, surrounded by walls and guarded gates. It is a mosque that few have seen and even fewer have prayed in. To the outside world, the existence of this small building has become a symbol of paradox. It embodies the tension between faith and power, between devotion and political necessity. In a country where citizens are forbidden to practice religion, the Ar-Rahman Mosque stands as both an exception and a reminder that even under totalitarian control, religion cannot be erased entirely. It adapts, survives, and reappears in the most unexpected corners of the world. In a country where religious life is officially non-existent, the idea of a Muslim community within North Korea seems almost impossible. Yet, evidence, though scarce and fragmentary, suggests that such a community does exist, hidden in plain sight and sustained through quiet resilience. Most of what is known about Islam in North Korea comes from the testimonies of former diplomats, visiting scholars, and rare foreign workers who spent time in Pyongyang. Their accounts, corroborated by diplomatic records and limited photographic evidence, reveal that a small number of foreign Muslims have lived in the capital for decades. They are primarily diplomats, engineers, and technicians from the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia, countries with long-standing political or economic ties to Pyongyang. Many of these individuals come from Iran, Syria, Libya, Pakistan, and Egypt, stationed in North Korea to work in embassies or to assist in cooperative projects ranging from infrastructure to scientific training. For them, life in Pyongyang is a paradox of privilege and restriction. They live within a diplomatic enclave that provides relative freedom compared to the local population, yet they are constantly aware of the surveillance and ideological rigidity surrounding them. Within these embassy compounds, Islam continues, quietly. The 5 daily prayers are performed behind closed doors. The fasting month of Ramadan is observed in silence. Eid celebrations are held in private, often with a handful of attendees gathered in the small prayer hall of the Iranian embassy's Ar-Rahman mosque. There are no calls to prayer, no public sermons, and no gatherings beyond the limited circle of foreign Muslims. Faith, in this context, survives not through visibility, but through discipline and remembrance. As for the North Korean citizens themselves, almost nothing is known with certainty. Religion is criminalized under Article 68 of the North Korean Constitution if practiced outside state-sanctioned control. Conversion, proselytization, or even possession of religious material can be punished by imprisonment or worse. Still, a few unverified reports from defectors and former foreign students hint that some North Koreans who studied abroad, particularly in Pakistan during the 1980s and 1990s, may have encountered Islam. Some might have learned about the faith through personal relationships or academic exchange, but whether any of them embraced Islam upon returning home remains a mystery. If such conversions occurred, they would have had to remain absolutely secret, concealed even from family members, for to profess belief in any religion would be seen as a direct act of rebellion against the state. In North Korea's system of total control, where thought, speech, and association are monitored, personal faith becomes an act of profound defiance. To believe in something beyond the supreme leader, to direct one's devotion to an unseen God, is to quietly reject the ideological foundation of the regime itself. Thus, in Pyongyang, the Muslim community is not defined by mosques, public gatherings, or institutions. It is defined by privacy, restraint, and secrecy. It is a community that exists not in the open spaces of society, but in the inner spaces of conscience. The relationship between Islam and North Korea's ruling ideology, Juche, is one of quiet contradiction. Juche, often translated as self-reliance, is not merely a political philosophy, but a quasi-religious doctrine that elevates loyalty to the supreme leader above all else. Combined with Songun, or the military-first policy, it forms the ideological backbone of the regime. Both reject the notion of any divine authority higher than the state, making the very idea of monotheism fundamentally incompatible with North Korean governance. Under Juche, spiritual devotion is redirected toward the Kim family lineage. Portraits of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il are treated with near-religious reverence, and expressions of faith that compete with this ideological loyalty are seen as acts of subversion. The state's constitution technically guarantees freedom of religion, but in practice, this freedom exists only within state-approved boundaries. Religious activities outside of official control, whether Christian, Buddhist, or Muslim, are classified as anti-state behavior and can lead to imprisonment, forced labor, or execution. In this context, Islam's presence in North Korea is not ideological but diplomatic. The regime maintains cordial ties with several Muslim-majority nations, including Iran, Syria, Egypt, and Palestine, primarily through shared political interests rather than religious sympathy. The Ar-Rahman Mosque, for example, stands within the Iranian embassy compound in Pyongyang, not as a reflection of North Korean religious tolerance, but as a symbol of diplomatic coexistence. Its presence serves as a political gesture rather than an endorsement of faith. Over the years, North Korea has expressed rhetorical support for Palestinian independence, condemning Israel's policies and aligning itself with broader anti-imperialist narratives in the Muslim world. This has earned Pyongyang limited goodwill among some Islamic nations. However, such gestures are purely strategic, allowing the regime to maintain a facade of international solidarity while keeping its borders and beliefs tightly sealed. From an ideological standpoint, Yuchi views religion as an obstacle to the development of the self-reliant human. The teachings of Islam, which emphasize submission to God and moral accountability beyond the state, challenge the regime's foundation of total ideological control. Thus, even a small expression of faith could be interpreted as an act of defiance. North Korea's relationship with the Muslim world is shaped not by shared faith, but by strategic politics. Since the 1980s, Pyongyang has presented itself as a supporter of anti-imperialist movements, and among its most consistent causes has been the Palestinian struggle. Official North Korean statements and publications have long condemned Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories, framing it as part of a broader resistance against Western domination. This stance was never rooted in religious solidarity, but in ideological alignment, a shared narrative of resistance against U.S. influence and global capitalism. Throughout the Cold War, North Korea provided limited but symbolic military and technical assistance to Palestinian groups and other liberation movements across the Middle East and Africa. The regime used this diplomacy to build connections with nations such as Syria, Egypt, Libya, and Iran, forming a network of partners who viewed Pyongyang as a fellow opponent of Western hegemony. These ties often translated into exchanges of military expertise, scientific collaboration, and economic cooperation, particularly with Iran. The relationship between North Korea and Iran has remained one of the most enduring. The two countries, both under heavy international sanctions, have developed a mutual dependency that extends into military research, missile technology, and strategic defense. Iranian engineers and diplomats have lived and worked in Pyongyang, and within the Iranian embassy compound stands the Ar-Rahman Mosque, the only functioning mosque in the entire country. This mosque, built in the 1990s, serves as a private space for Muslim diplomats and visitors, symbolizing not the acceptance of Islam within North Korea, but the diplomatic accommodation of allies. Occasionally, during state ceremonies or diplomatic events, Islamic symbols such as the crescent moon or the SHAHADA have appeared on flags or banners within embassy grounds. However, these images are confined to controlled international contexts, never integrated into public or cultural life. For the North Korean state, such symbols serve as gestures of courtesy, not expressions of belief. They are calculated displays of respect designed to maintain favorable diplomatic relations with Muslim-majority nations, especially those critical of the United States. In contemporary geopolitics, North Korea continues to sustain limited engagement with countries in the Middle East and North Africa, including Iran, Syria, Egypt, and Algeria. These relationships offer Pyongyang rare economic and technological exchanges amid global isolation. Yet, despite these outward connections, there is no sign of Islamic influence within North Korean society itself. Religion remains suppressed, and faith-based interaction is tightly restricted to the diplomatic community. Thus, North Korea's engagement with the Muslim world exists on two levels: political solidarity abroad and absolute silence at home. The regime skillfully employs its pro-Palestine stance and partnerships with Islamic nations to bolster its international legitimacy and resist isolation, while ensuring that no religious ideology, Islam included, challenges the supremacy of Juche within its borders. Despite North Korea's near-total isolation from global culture, the idea of faith has not been entirely extinguished. While no official statistics exist, and open discussion of religion is criminalized, accounts from defectors, diplomats, and humanitarian visitors suggest that curiosity about religion, including Islam, quietly exists beneath the surface of this highly controlled society. In a nation where information is monopolized by the state, even the faintest glimpse of the outside world carries enormous weight. For many young North Koreans, clandestine exposure to foreign media, through smuggled radio broadcasts, USB drives, or whispered conversations with travelers, offers their first encounter with ideas forbidden by the regime. Among these forbidden ideas is religion, and for a few, Islam has become a subject of intrigue. Interviews with defectors in Seoul and Beijing describe how some educated North Koreans, particularly those who studied abroad in friendly nations such as Pakistan, Iran, or Egypt, came into contact with Islam during their training. While they were expected to remain politically loyal to Pyongyang, exposure to Muslim societies introduced them to concepts of prayer, community, and divine accountability, values deeply foreign to the atheistic framework of Juche. A handful of these individuals have reportedly continued to reflect on those experiences even after returning home, though any open expression of belief would risk severe punishment. For most citizens, the only perception of Islam comes through state propaganda, which tends to portray all religion as superstition or as a tool of Western manipulation. Yet paradoxically, the regime's diplomatic friendliness toward Iran and Palestine creates subtle contradictions. Official media may condemn religion, but state news occasionally reports on friendly exchanges with Muslim nations, leaving some North Koreans to question why a supposedly godless state maintains respect for certain faith-based countries. These small inconsistencies often ignite quiet curiosity, an unspoken interest that cannot be voiced. Defectors frequently describe this inner tension. Some recall first hearing about Islam through foreign radio programs or brief encounters with Muslim workers during construction projects. In a land where spiritual life is forbidden, the very existence of another worldview becomes a symbol of freedom, not necessarily religious conversion, but the desire to think and believe independently. Islam, in this sense, represents more than theology. It becomes an idea of mental liberation from total ideological control. While no verified evidence suggests that an underground Muslim community of North Korean citizens exists today, the psychological presence of faith, curiosity, longing, and doubt remains a subtle but profound undercurrent. Even in the most restrictive environment on earth, the human spirit seeks meaning beyond political dogma. For some North Koreans, Islam is not a call to prayer, but a whisper of possibility, proof that another world governed by conscience and belief rather than fear truly exists beyond their borders. In North Korea, faith itself is an act of defiance. Possessing a sacred text, uttering a prayer, or gathering in worship, acts taken for granted in most of the world, can lead to imprisonment, forced labor, or even execution. Within such a system, Islam survives only in silence. There are no public mosques, no call to prayer echoing through city streets, no visible expressions of Muslim identity. What remains is a faith practiced in whispers, confined within the guarded walls of a foreign embassy. The Ar-Rahman Mosque in Pyongyang stands as the only house of worship in the entire country, and even it exists not for the citizens of North Korea, but for the Muslim diplomats and expatriates who reside there. Hidden inside the compound of the Iranian embassy, it is a structure few North Koreans will ever see, and even fewer will ever enter. Yet its presence carries profound symbolism. Each time a Muslim bows his head in prayer within those walls, it becomes a quiet assertion that faith cannot be imprisoned, no matter how total the regime's control may seem. For the North Korean government, religion represents a threat to absolute authority. The state demands spiritual allegiance to its leaders, positioning Kim Il-sung and his successors as near-divine figures. In such a context, the very idea of submitting to a higher power, one beyond the supreme leader, is existentially subversive. Thus, Islam, Christianity, or any faith rooted in transcendence becomes inherently dangerous to the ideological order of Juche. And yet, even in this enforced atheism, belief finds a way to persist, not through open conversion or organized worship, but through the enduring human impulse to seek meaning beyond the material and the political. The presence of Muslim diplomats, the existence of an embassy mosque, and the sporadic curiosity of young North Koreans all hint at something deeper, that the human soul resists total submission to the state. In Pyongyang, there are no minarets, no Quran study circles, no Friday sermons. But within the quiet chambers of the Ar-Rahman Mosque, when the Adhan is recited softly among a handful of foreign worshippers, it resonates beyond its walls. It becomes a symbolic act of endurance, a reminder that faith, though suppressed, remains undefeated. To the outside observer, Islam's quiet existence in North Korea appears as both a paradox and a revelation. How can a nation built upon militant atheism, where worship is criminalized and reverence is owed solely to political leaders, allow even a single mosque to stand, especially in the heart of its capital, Pyongyang? For scholars, diplomats, and religious observers, this coexistence of repression and permission presents one of the most profound contradictions in modern geopolitics. From a diplomatic standpoint, the Ar-Rahman Mosque functions as a calculated exception. It exists not as a symbol of religious freedom, but as an instrument of international diplomacy. By allowing Iran, one of its closest allies, to maintain a functioning mosque within its embassy, Pyongyang signals a gesture of respect to the Islamic world, particularly to nations that share its anti-Western stance. To some analysts, this is a shrewd move by the regime, a way to project tolerance externally while maintaining absolute control internally. However, researchers of religion and human rights see a different narrative, one that exposes the fragility of spiritual life under totalitarian rule. The very fact that a single mosque must exist behind embassy walls, inaccessible to ordinary citizens, underscores the deep contradiction between North Korea's international posture and its domestic reality. What is presented to the world as coexistence is, in truth, a tightly confined accommodation, carefully insulated from the country's population. To diplomats who have visited Pyongyang, the experience of entering the Ar-Rahman Mosque can be haunting. Outside its gates, a city of millions lives under constant surveillance, where citizens are forbidden from even possessing a Bible or a Quran. Inside, a small group of Muslims kneel in peace, their prayers echoing softly in a city that officially denies the very existence of God. The image is almost surreal, a microcosm of contradiction where faith and authoritarianism momentarily share the same geography without ever truly meeting. For theologians and political theorists alike, this phenomenon challenges conventional definitions of religious tolerance. Is the existence of one mosque in a nation that suppresses all belief a sign of progress or proof of spiritual confinement? Opinions differ. Some interpret it as a symbolic opening, a faint acknowledgement that faith cannot be entirely erased from human society. Others see it as the ultimate paradox of totalitarian diplomacy, a regime so absolute that it even dictates where and how God may be worshipped. Behind the parades, the propaganda, and the towering statues of leaders, there may exist, somewhere in Pyongyang, a solitary whisper, La ilaha illallah. No witness, no congregation, no call to prayer, only a quiet faith, alive in silence. The story of Islam in North Korea is not one of numbers or expansion. It is a story of existence against impossibility. In a nation where faith itself is forbidden, belief becomes an act of profound courage. To whisper the name of God in such a place is not merely religious devotion. It is a declaration of inner freedom. North Korea presents to the world the image of absolute control, synchronized military parades, choreographed loyalty, and a people bound by ideology. Yet, beneath this grand theater, human hearts still beat with questions. Questions about truth, meaning, and the unseen. And it is within these hidden questions that the idea of God continues to survive, unacknowledged but unextinguished. In this context, Islam's presence, however minimal, however invisible, holds immense symbolic weight. Each prayer recited within the Ar-Rahman Mosque, each foreign diplomat who bows in worship, becomes a reminder that the divine cannot be contained by borders or regimes. Faith does not require permission to exist. It exists because the human spirit demands it. For some, Islam in North Korea is a mystery. For others, it is a paradox. But perhaps most deeply, it is a testimony to resilience, the quiet endurance of belief in a land that has outlawed it. Behind the curtain of totalitarianism, beyond the gaze of the state, there may still be a soul who believes, a heart that remembers, and a whisper that defies silence. In the end, the story of Islam in North Korea is not about religion itself. It is about the unbreakable human instinct to reach for something higher, even in the darkest of places. It is about faith that survives without recognition, hope that breathes without sound, and a God who remains, unseen, unspoken, but never absent. Thanks for watching until the end. I hope it was useful. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.